My mom's final gift to me wasn't gold or diamonds. It was a worn silver ring with a fading engraving, and a story that spanned generations. She placed it gently in my hand before she passed, saying, "This is your great-grandmother's engagement ring. Keep it safe. Keep it sacred." But weeks later, my sister tossed it in the trash and sneered, "It's just ugly junk." She thought the story would die with the ring, but she had no idea what I was about to do. Have you ever lost something that meant everything because someone else decided it didn't matter? If this story stirs something in you, let me know in the comments. And if you believe memories deserve to be honored, not tossed away, like, subscribe, and stay with me. Growing up, my sister Vanessa and I couldn't have been more different, even though we were just 3 years apart. She was bold, charismatic, always the center of attention. Her voice filled every room, her laughter turned heads, and even as a kid, she had this sharpness, like she was already negotiating with the world, calculating outcomes. Me? I was quieter, observant. I loved books, pressed flowers between pages, and spent hours in the kitchen with Mom, listening to old stories while stirring soup. I didn't crave the spotlight. I craved connection. Our mother, Evelyn, tried to keep the peace between us, but even she couldn't deny that the energy between Vanessa and me was unbalanced. Vanessa was the spark, the storm. I was the stillness that followed. I think it was hardest for Mom in those final months. Her body had grown frail, her voice softer, but her mind, oh, it stayed sharp. She knew what was coming, and she was determined to put things in order, quietly, meaningfully. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I visited her alone. Vanessa had sent a text that morning. "Too tired, maybe next week." Typical. Mom was curled up on the couch, wearing her faded lavender cardigan, the one with the fraying cuffs. A blanket covered her legs, and beside her sat a small wooden box I hadn't noticed before. She looked at me with those soft, knowing eyes and patted the space next to her. "Come sit," she said. "I have something for you." Inside that wooden box was a ring, not flashy, not expensive looking. The silver was tarnished in places, and the band was slightly warped with time. A delicate engraving on the inside read, "AR to LM, 1939. "I know it doesn't look like much," Mom said gently, lifting it from its satin cushion. "But this was your great-grandmother's engagement ring. She wore it through the war. She traded food rations for the silver to have it made." I held it in my palm. It was warm from her hands and oddly light. "She gave it to me when I married your father," she continued, her voice catching slightly. "And I always knew I'd pass it on, to the daughter who understood its worth." That last part sat in the air for a moment, unsaid, but understood. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words more than the ring itself. "Thank you," I whispered. Mom smiled, tired, content, and certain. "It's not about the ring. It's about remembering who came before and honoring what they endured. It's love, held in metal." We didn't talk much after that. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we listened to the rain for a long time. Weeks later, she passed peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was small, just close family and a few lifelong friends. Vanessa showed up late, eyeliner perfectly done, wearing heels too high for the soft grass at the cemetery. I didn't mention the ring. I didn't think I needed to. In the months that followed, I kept it tucked safely in a velvet pouch inside my nightstand. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream for attention. But it made me feel like I was still holding a part of Mom, a part of all the women who'd come before me. Then came the job offer. It was a dream position at a publishing house in Portland. Far from home, fast-paced, but everything I had worked for. The move had to be quick, and in the chaos of packing and signing leases, I made a decision I'd later regret. I asked Vanessa to keep the ring safe for me until I got settled. "You sure?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I mean, you know how I am with small stuff. I gave her a tight smile. I trust you. I should have known better. But sometimes we choose trust not because it's wise, but because we want to believe people can rise to the moment. And for a little while, I let myself believe that. I returned home 6 weeks later, exhausted, jet-lagged, but excited. My new job had started strong, and I was finally getting settled into my apartment. I had brought a small potted plant for Vanessa as a thank you. Nothing major, just a symbol of appreciation. She opened the door in her usual way, half smile, phone still in hand, barely present. The apartment smelled like strong perfume and something slightly burnt. I brought you something, I said, holding out the plant. She looked at it, then shrugged. Cool, thanks. I took a deep breath and smiled anyway. So, I said, trying to keep it casual, do you still have the ring? Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen for a split second. Then she scoffed. That ugly thing? You mean that silver one Mom gave you? I froze. Yeah, the one I asked you to keep safe? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, that. I tossed it. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. You… what? I threw it out, she said flatly, as if she were talking about a moldy sandwich. It was junk. Like, really? That's what Mom left you? Some rusty little thing from like the 1800s? My throat closed up. You threw away Mom's ring? I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Vanessa scoffed again. Don't make a scene, Emily. You're always so dramatic. Mom always babied you, always acted like you were the precious one. Honestly, I'm surprised she didn't leave you her ashes in a gold jar or something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just the ring. It was everything in her voice. The mocking tone, the jealousy, the casual cruelty. I wanted to scream, to reach into her chest and shake loose whatever part of her thought this was okay. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart pounding, eyes burning, mouth dry. I left her apartment without another word. The second I got into my car, I let the sobs come, quiet at first, then louder. Not the polite kind of crying, the kind you do at funerals with tissues and soft sighs. No, this was grief. Raw, full-bodied, echoing through the steering wheel I clung to like a lifeline. The ring was gone. The last piece of my mother. Our mother. Gone because my sister decided it was ugly. And I knew this wasn't about a ring. Not really. It was about how Vanessa had always minimized me, always dismissed the things I cared about. How she couldn't stand that Mom saw me, really saw me. The more I sat in that parking lot, the more the pain turned. From sadness to something else. Resolve. Vanessa didn't just throw away a ring, she threw away a legacy, a memory, a sacred thread between generations of women who had endured, loved, and held on. And I was done letting her narrative be the only one. If she thought that by tossing the ring, she'd silence our mother's voice, she had no idea what she'd just awakened in me. The next morning I woke up with a strange sense of stillness. The anger was still there, coiled in my chest, but it had crystallized overnight into something sharper, purposeful. I wasn't going to beg Vanessa. I wasn't going to scream or fight for an apology she'd never mean. No, I was going to do something she'd never expect. Something that didn't scream for attention, but demanded it anyway. The first thing I did was find a jeweler. Not just any jeweler. I searched for artisans who specialized in antique reconstruction, people who respected history, who didn't just make jewelry, but told stories with their hands. After days of searching and calling, I found him. An older man named Lowell, who ran a quiet little studio tucked behind a bookstore in the outskirts of town. When I arrived, he was polishing a brooch beneath a desk lamp. He looked up with tired eyes and said, "Tell me the story. Not the item. The story. That's what matters." So I told him. I told him about the silver ring, the engraving, the cold afternoon when Mom placed it in my hand. I described every detail I could recall, the way the metal was soft along the band, the way the engraving curled like ivy, the way my mom's fingers trembled just slightly when she passed it on to me. He listened without interrupting, then finally nodded. "I can't bring back your mother's touch," he said softly, "but I can honor what she left behind." 2 weeks later, he called me in to see the replica. It took my breath away. The same slight warp in the band, the same delicate swirl inside. AR to LM 1939. It wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why it was perfect. It wasn't meant to shine. It was meant to hold memory. I slipped it on and closed my eyes. I imagined Mom's hand over mine. I imagined her smile. But that was only the first step. The second step came late one night, when I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold tea and opened my laptop. The blank Word document blinked at me, waiting. I began to write. Not a journal entry, not a rant, a story. I titled it The Ugly Ring. And then, with every keystroke, I poured my grief, my fury, my longing into sentences. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. But the story was honest, brutally so. A girl who was quiet, overlooked, a sister who craved power, who broke things she didn't understand, a mother whose final gift was dismissed as trash, but held the weight of love and generations. It wasn't just about the ring, it was about inheritance. Emotional, not material. It was about what we choose to remember, and what others try to erase. It took me 4 nights to finish the draft. On the 5th, I read it aloud to myself, crying quietly somewhere between paragraph 3 and the final line. On the 6th night, I submitted it to Truth Spoken, a literary journal that focused on grief, family, and legacy. They received hundreds of entries a month, but something in me whispered, this one mattered. And then I waited. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. I'd almost talked myself into believing it would go nowhere, that maybe this wasn't the kind of story people cared about anymore. It didn't have fireworks or betrayal worthy of tabloids, just one small ring and one woman trying to hold on to what mattered. But then, I got the email. Subject: The Ugly Ring. Accepted for publication. They said they rarely sent personal replies, but something about the story struck them. It felt like we were sitting in the room, the editor wrote. You didn't just talk about loss, you made us feel it. I read the message 5 times, then sat in stunned silence as the tears returned. This time, not from grief, but from validation. A month later, the story went live. It didn't go viral overnight, but slowly, quietly, it began to spread. Comments started trickling in. This made me call my grandmother just to hear her voice. I have my mom's brooch. It's bent and ugly, but now I'll never look at it the same. I cried, and then I shared it with every woman in my life. Somehow my pain had become a bridge, connecting strangers through shared memory, through unspoken heartbreaks and heirlooms that only mattered because of who once wore them. Then came the podcast request, then the radio interview, and finally, the TEDx talk. It was surreal, standing backstage, wearing the replica ring, waiting for the red light to blink and cue my walk onto the small circular carpet. I wasn't a speaker by trade, but the story, it carried itself. I began with silence. Then, my mother didn't leave me money or real estate. She left me a silver ring that looked like nothing, but it meant everything. I saw people lean in, saw the recognition in their eyes, and for 15 minutes I told them what I had lived. Not just the loss of the ring, but the loss of being heard, the quiet grief of being dismissed, and the quiet power of reclaiming your narrative. The applause at the end didn't matter as much as what happened a week later. Vanessa called. I didn't answer. 2 days after that, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't know how she found the address, but there she was, in designer sunglasses and a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. I heard, "Your story's making the rounds," she said, stepping into my hallway without asking. I folded my arms. "You mean the story about the ring?" Her mouth twitched. "I didn't know you were that kind of writer." "I didn't know you were the kind of person who needed a crowd to feel regret," I said flatly. Her eyes narrowed. "People are asking questions. At work, online. Some think it's about me." "Is it?" I asked. Quiet. Calm. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood there in awkward silence for a full minute, then turned and left. No apology, just discomfort. But it was enough. She felt it. The sting of being seen, not in a photo, not in a filtered post, but in truth. And for once, I wasn't the one made small. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's honest. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or dismissed, tell me your story in the comments. And if this moment made you smile just a little, like, subscribe, and stay for the next chapter. After Vanessa left my apartment, something shifted. She didn't say she was sorry, but her presence alone, uninvited and nervous, told me enough. She was rattled. And for the first time in our lives, I held the mirror, and she couldn't look away without flinching. But I wasn't finished. The TEDx video was posted online 3 weeks later. It didn't explode at first, but like the story, it crept. Quietly, steadily, view after view, comment after comment. And then came the shares. It found its way onto grief support forums, women's groups, even LinkedIn, where professionals wrote things like, "This isn't just about loss. It's about the legacy of emotional inheritance. Powerful, raw. I'll never look at a family heirloom the same again." Soon, I was invited to sit on a panel for a digital storytelling summit, then asked to write a short column for a lifestyle magazine. Each new request wasn't about ego, it was about the message. Every time I spoke, I wore the ring. It had become my quiet armor. Meanwhile, Vanessa was losing control of the narrative she'd always carefully constructed. The woman with the curated life, flawless Instagram grid, designer wardrobe, always smiling at fundraisers, was being gently questioned in hushed circles. She texted once, "Why are people assuming your story is about me?" I didn't reply, because deep down, she already knew. Still, she didn't disappear. She started showing up at the same events I was invited to, sometimes just as an attendee, sometimes as a guest of someone else, always hovering near the edges, never fully stepping in. At one local event, a woman I didn't know approached me after my talk. "You're Emily, right?" she said, eyes kind but sharp. "I used to work with your sister. I always wondered why she seemed so polished, but cold. Your story made something click." It was a strange thing, to be seen not just for the pain, but for the person behind it. Meanwhile, Vanessa was unraveling quietly. A friend told me she'd deleted a handful of old social media posts, ones where she used to flaunt her status or make jabs masked as humor. Another said she'd been asked to step down from planning a corporate wellness campaign after someone brought up a family drama that didn't align with the brand. Still, I hadn't named her, not once. That was the brilliance of it. I told the truth without ever pointing a finger. And the truth had its own gravity. It pulled things into the light whether people wanted it or not. Then came the gala, a charity event for women's mental health where I'd been asked to speak briefly about emotional legacy. I said yes. Vanessa was on the guest list. The night of the gala arrived like a slow wave, elegant, heavy, inevitable. I wore a dark blue dress, simple and clean, with Mom's ring, my ring, resting on my finger like a quiet vow. In my clutch, I carried a copy of the short story, freshly printed on linen paper, folded in thirds. I didn't know if I'd need it, but it felt like a shield I couldn't leave behind. The ballroom buzzed with conversation, the soft clink of glasses, the hum of a jazz trio tucked into the corner. Everything sparkled, chandeliers, sequins, curated smiles. I spotted her across the room instantly. Vanessa stood by the wine table, radiant as ever in a cream gown, hair swept into a practiced wave. But her eyes flicked constantly, like she was searching for the next person to impress, or the next conversation to steer. She hadn't seen me yet. The program moved swiftly. A keynote on resilience, a short film on generational trauma. Then came the moment. Legacy Through Loss, a storytelling reflection by Emily Hale. I walked onto the stage with a breath held just behind my teeth. The podium was warm under my hands. I didn't read a script. I didn't need to. I just told the truth. My mother didn't teach me how to make a fortune, I began. She taught me how to hold on to love, even when it wasn't flashy, even when the world said it wasn't worth anything. I let the silence hang for a moment. She gave me a silver ring once, tarnished, old, a little bent, and someone I trusted threw it away, called it junk. But here's the thing, that ring held more than metal. It held memory, it held story, it held women who loved, endured, and survived. In the audience, I saw shoulders stiffen, heads nod. One woman wiped her cheek. And then, there she was. Vanessa had entered my line of sight, standing near the back, just left of the floral arch. She wasn't smiling. Her arms were crossed, her gaze fixed. I finished softly. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see the value in what we carry, because they never learned how to carry their own. But when we speak, when we write, we take back what was dismissed, and we make it sacred again. Applause filled the room, not thunderous, but real. People stood. People reached for my hand as I stepped off the stage. And Vanessa? She stayed where she was, frozen, exposed. Not because I called her out, but because I didn't have to. I never said her name, but the silence around her was deafening. Later that night, I saw her lingering near the valet stand. She looked smaller, or maybe I just looked taller. She stepped toward me, opened her mouth, then closed it again. I handed her the folded story. "This is for you," I said. She took it with trembling hands, and I walked away. After the gala, I didn't hear from Vanessa for days. No texts, no unexpected visits, no backhanded voicemails about how dramatic I was being, just silence. And for the first time in years, I welcomed it. The air in my life felt clearer, like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. For too long, I'd accepted her presence like background noise, something you can't turn off, only tune out. But now, I understood something different. Silence could be a boundary, and boundaries could be power. I started saying no. To the weekly family Zoom calls where Vanessa always monopolized the screen with her updates. To the holidays she used as stages for control. To the urge inside me that always wanted to explain myself, to smooth things over just so no one else would feel uncomfortable. I let discomfort sit in its rightful place, on her side. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about restoration. Mom used to say, "People will show you who they are when they think you're not watching." I had spent years watching Vanessa twist the narrative, rewrite history, claim more space than she was ever owed. But now the truth lived in the open. It had taken root in the world, not as gossip, not as slander, but as a story that resonated far beyond just the two of us. And people were listening. Old friends messaged me, saying how they'd always sensed something in the dynamic between us but couldn't name it. Strangers wrote about their own versions of a Vanessa in their lives. I wasn't alone. And more importantly, I wasn't invisible. One afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address. I recognized the loopy cursive immediately. It was from Vanessa. I read your story, finally. I didn't think it would hit me the way it did. I won't pretend to understand everything, but I'm sorry. Not just for the ring, for all the ways I made you feel small. You didn't deserve that. Maybe someday we can talk. If you want. I read the letter twice. The letter. Then I folded it gently and placed it inside the same box where I now kept the replica ring and Mom's final birthday card. It wasn't time for reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was enough to know she finally saw the truth. And I no longer needed her to validate it. That was the real gift Mom had left me. Not the ring itself, but the courage to protect what mattered, to speak even when your voice shakes, and to walk away from anyone who confuses love with control. I had found my voice, and this time I wasn't giving it back. Spring came slowly that year. It crept in with pale yellow sunlight on my windowsill, the smell of damp earth rising from the sidewalks, and the soft rustle of green returning to bare branches. I started taking morning walks again, just around the block, sometimes longer, and noticed how different everything looked when I wasn't carrying unspoken grief like a second spine. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like a drum roll or an applause break. It's subtle, quiet. One morning I reached for my tea and realized I hadn't thought about the ring in days, not because I didn't care, but because I had made peace with its absence. And somehow, that made it more present than ever. Mom felt closer in small moments now, in the way I arranged flowers in a jar, or in how I rewrote a stubborn paragraph until it sounded just right. She lived in my gentleness, in my refusal to harden, in my words. I kept writing, not just about her, or the ring, or Vanessa, but about resilience, about women who lose and still choose softness, about quiet people who carry loud truths. I published more essays. I spoke at libraries, high schools, even a community center for seniors. Every time I shared the ugly ring, someone came up afterward to whisper, "I have something like that too." It was never about the silver. It was always about the story. I no longer needed revenge. I had something richer, resonance. As for Vanessa, we didn't become close again. There were no tearful reunions or sisterly brunches with two sweet mimosas. But we exchanged a few holiday cards. She sent me a photo once of our mother's favorite roses blooming in her backyard. No caption, just the image. I replied with a simple, "She would have loved that." It was enough. Maybe some wounds don't close, but they stop bleeding. And that's its own kind of mercy. I still keep the replica ring in its wooden box, nestled beside Mom's card and Vanessa's apology. I don't wear it every day, but I do, sometimes, when I'm nervous before a speech or when I'm about to write something that scares me. It reminds me where I come from. It reminds me of the women who came before me. It reminds me that worth isn't measured by shine, but by memory and love. If you're listening to this and you've ever had something precious thrown away, by a person, by time, by life, I hope you know this. You can't always get it back, but you can build something from the ashes. You can write your way through. And in doing so, you might just help someone else find their voice too. Because even an ugly ring can shine when seen through the right eyes.